Our first superstar panel. This is navigating M&A during a global crisis. We have a Shum Singh who will be moderating this panel. But just while we get everything set up, I'd like to thank again Agnitio Capital for sponsoring today's Show Me the Money track, and to remind you that you can tweet about how you found the conference so far using the hashtag PGConnects.
Great. I think I'll kick it off. So firstly, really excited to be back doing panels again with these gentlemen as well. Had the opportunity to work with all of them. Maybe I'll say a few words if you guys don't mind. Just introduce you guys. Firstly, myself, I'm Shum Singh, the founder and MD of Agnitio Capital. We are an investment bank based here in London, but also with offices in Seattle and Moscow. We've been exclusively focused on the games industry for 18 years. We specialize in working with game founders, really in exiting their businesses or helping them really think through other strategic alternatives. We've been very active during the pandemic, and that's really the principal nature of this topic, this panel. I'll start off with Ken Go. We actually had the opportunity to work together in selling his studio to Embracer back right in the middle of the pandemic, in fact, in August of 2020. He's also taken over really spearheading Embracer's mobile division and has done quite a few acquisitions on the buy side that he can allude to and talk to later on in the discussion. Ronen Gross is head of M&A at Aristocrat Digital, which made a number of transactions and actually very recently acquired a Finnish studio that Ronen was chiefly responsible for executing. And then at the end is John Peterson, who runs M&A at Jam City, one of the leading still private players on the West Coast. And they actually made a pretty transformative transaction recently in acquiring Ludia in Montreal. If I missed anything, please add in. But I had some questions. Obviously, I think when the pandemic began, I certainly, we're in the middle of 3 or 4 transactions. As an M&A banker, you kind of gasp and just say, what happened, and are these transactions actually going to conclude? And all of them are in different phases of execution, and you're wondering, well, are buyers nervous? Are they going to potentially stop or postpone these transactions due to significant market pressure and seeing share prices dramatically decline? There was a lot of uncertainty. But shortly, what we experienced was that, and particularly with people staying at home playing games, the market stormed back. And it was quite a unique experience having transacted and advised on a lot of companies without ever actually having meeting the other acquiring party or seller across the table. So I guess the first question, and I'll start off with you, Ken, who's experienced it on both sides of the table. What has the pandemic, the experience that you had, how can you sort of translate? Do you think it actually helped, navigate the M&A process, and certainly more recently, or do you, I guess, yeah, first would be the experience to all of you, and then I'll ask a follow-on question whether it impacted your decision-making from a negative or positive perspective.
So first, I guess on the installing the company, I can talk about that first. So luckily, I had in-person meetings with the Embracer Group before I sold the company, and we just executed at the very end during the pandemic. That was, I think, nerve-wracking for a lot of people right at the beginning of the pandemic, because people didn't know what was going to happen next, and whether it was going to be a short 1-month blip or a couple year-long blip, as it has actually been, and what was going to happen to the stock market. And when you do a deal where you're taking a significant portion in shares, that actually makes a pretty big difference. And I ended up doing my deal where I took 100% in shares, And so I took a big bet that actually the games market was going to improve over time. And that's the biggest, I'd say the biggest thing for me. And then on the buy side, I think overall it's helped, from my opinion, the process. I think in the past people were, you know, getting on planes and flying and try to meet in person multiple times, and I think that's very helpful. And ideally, you'd be able to do that, but because we can't do that now, or we couldn't do that for the last few years, it really forced us to rely on the online tools and to make decisions more quickly and to not rely on those in-person meetings. And I think that's saved a lot of time and money, of course, traveling. But it's allowed us to get comfortable after you do it a couple times. At first time, you're a little bit scared because you haven't met people in person and you're potentially spending a lot of money on a big acquisition and never meeting somebody in person, or maybe never, not seeing the operations. But after you do it and you get comfortable doing it, then you feel like actually it's a very you feel more free, because then you can think about transacting with people in places that you might not ever have thought of going before. You can talk with a lot more people by doing it online, and you can get a lot more done in a short amount of period of time.
Yeah, completely agree. I think that from our perspective, so I think that from our perspective, yeah, I mean, conferences and the 3D meetings are much better than all the online. And basically, conferences was a great resource for us for the pipeline, creating the pipeline, and stop having conferences was a bit shocking in the beginning because we thought what would happen. But I think what we did is building a pipeline throughout the conferences in 2019. So we had enough companies that we can talk to during the pandemic. Once we realized that the pandemic is here to stay and it's not like a one kind of thing, like a 2-3 months thing, we started to realize that to the idea that we'll need to do some deals with all the online tools. Eventually, what it did, it has some obviously positive and negative impacts. The positive, that you could talk to much more companies than before. You did some more talks that you were afraid of taking only online, so you had to travel. So sometimes travel was not able because of some restrictions or some other business issues. And I can tell you that one time we even missed an opportunity because we couldn't travel. So I think that now that you can do all those things online, allows you to be more flexible, allows you to do more deals eventually. And I think that with our recent acquisition, we did 90% of the due diligence online. But I think that the thing that actually closed the deal is that we had like a window that we could travel, and we did travel during the pandemic. And when we met the team, that what actually made us seal the deal. So it has a lot of pros and cons. And now obviously it allows you to do more, explore more companies, increase the pipeline. But again, meeting new companies and creating companies for the future pipeline, for the long term, I think meeting in person and those kind of conferences are the best way to go.
Yeah, I think we're all excited to be here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. It's like, let's travel, let's meet companies, let's meet people. There's nothing better than giving Ken an elbow or giving Ronen a hug. So it's great to see everybody. It's great to develop new relationships. We personally, we did one deal during the pandemic. It was a big one. It was exciting, but we never got to go meet the studio. We never got to go, do the diligence in person like we usually do. So that it was a good deal for us, but we were missing something there. So I think it's super important to establish relationships at these events. Deals aren't going to get done at these events, but they'll start, and so that's what's super exciting. And as far as Zoom and whatnot, it's fantastic. If we didn't have that, it'd be horrible. Got a lot done, more efficient meetings, but at the end, in person's the best for me.
I agree with all of you. I mean, I don't have to explain that to you, but I mean, you're seeing this sort of, and I'm hearing it echo from you guys, this kind of hybrid situation where you'll do as much research as you can online, meet as many companies as you can, do the hundreds of Zoom calls, etc. But of course, to seal a deal, as you pointed out, Ronen, it was pretty important to have that physical contact. How do you see kind of in the potentially post-pandemic world things changing? Do you think it's going to relatively be the same? Do you see yourself traveling like you used to 10 conferences a year or whatever that number is, or do you kind of be more let's say focused about which conferences you want to attend? And because you've been very productive, that's what I'm hearing, in identifying a lot of targets, do you just kind of hone in on specific conferences and say, you know what, these are the ones that are going to potentially produce, you know, the results we'd want?
I think that creating the pipeline is through those conferences. Obviously, we use a lot of tools like App Annie or Sensor Tower to detect companies, but again, there's no better way to meet people here and see their products and meet in person. And I think that if you look at the future in terms of actually making deals, I think it's going to be the hybrid model, which allows you much more flexibility than before, because you can talk to more companies on Zoom and start the conversation. And once you want to go deeper into the process, then you can travel. And those things were not available in the past. I mean, you needed to travel to each and every company you need to work with, and that could have, you know, time constraints could have made it a bit difficult. So now you have that flexibility of using also the online tools and also the you know, face-to-face tools. And eventually, again, as everybody said, and I'll say it again, the face-to-face tools eventually can give you much more insights than any online tool.
Yeah, completely agree. I think the efficiency of the tools that they've created with Zoom and whatnot are fantastic, but that's not going to take the place of, you know, all the conferences we go to. You know, we might scale it down one or two, but there's, you know, a good at least 4 or 5 conferences that we will not miss each year, such as Pocket Gamers.
Yeah, nothing more to add there other than I think bankers become more important in the new world, because you have, I think we are, you realize that you don't need to go to every conference to get introduced to everybody, and that you can pick and choose, and then bankers are doing a lot of the work to set up the pipeline for you. And although it's more expensive, it makes it a lot more convenient.
That was such a shameless plug for me. Thank you. You know, let's shift gears a bit. 2020 was, you know, kind of really exceptional, and I'm not even going to get into the first month of this year, which is absolutely astounding in terms of announced M&A deal volume. But I mean, I think we need to talk a little bit about how we got there today, which is really kind of more characterized by mega deals. But 2020 saw a tremendous amount of activity, unprecedented for, again, what we've all said, not being able to even meet each other face to face. Many deals being done completely remotely. We saw valuations soar, you know, public companies, but also private companies. 2021, kind of things changed, right? As there seemed to be glimmers of hope of moving beyond the pandemic, and a lot of share prices for a lot of public companies suffered tremendously. But because of this kind of rampant M&A, you know, wave, entrepreneurs haven't really, how should I say, adjusted their valuation expectations. When you're going out there now and evaluating, you know, the three of you, opportunities via, you know, all the various tools you have at your disposal, are you seeing some of that, where even though there's been a correction or adjustment, let's say, to share prices of a lot of the larger public share publishers worldwide, are you seeing sort of a disconnect, though, between what a private company game founder would value his company because they're just not aware of it?
Yeah, we're seeing a number of companies that they think their valuations here, public companies are here, and we're not there yet. So I think it's going to be probably take some time, maybe educating some bankers. Uh, kidding. I love Shum.
I brought it up.
No, so there's definitely opportunities out there, but I think they got to get realistic on where their prices are.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's it's a trend that we are seeing. I think that the industry today has much more consolidation. You see it on the medium-sized deals, you see it in the big-sized deals. Not a lot of companies also are out there and are still not public or still private, basically. And I think, yeah, we need to educate the companies as well. But still, we see, because of the consolidation process, we see valuation much even higher than before the pandemic. So yes, in 2020 or beginning of 21, we saw much higher. It a bit went down a bit, but still, it's higher than what we saw before.
Not much to add there. I think we all agree on this one.
Okay, no, that makes sense. That's pretty much verifies what we're seeing. What about in terms of, again, and I don't want to transition to Web3 blockchain, but we have to, because we all operate in a more traditional context, but I think it's you can't ignore just the emergence of Web3 metaverse blockchain companies and the amounts of money they've raised, and in fact now initiating even M&A, right? Forte buying Network, etc. Mythical doing a couple of deals. I mean, smaller deals, but it is starting. And I think that having had this valuation discussions that are based upon, revenue, EBITDA, etc., which don't necessarily apply to Web3 or blockchain gaming companies, how do you reconcile that as an acquirer from your perspective? And I want to start with you, John, first, because you're launching with Jam City your initial Web3 blockchain game that you can plug.
Champions Ascension. We're dropping next week, so it's exciting. Yeah, so from our perspective on the M&A side, just business side, we really wanted to jump in quickly, and we're, I guess, lucky enough to be big enough to where we can throw some money at it. If it works, amazing, great, super excited. We'll do more, but if it doesn't, we'll learn from it and might do it again, might not. So, yeah, from our perspective, we're big into to Web3. We're looking at 3 or 4 different opportunities right now. We want to grow that, and see where it goes. As far as the investment acquisition side of it, it's tough to get some companies to jump on board right now, even though we've done a lot of legwork ourselves. But I think in the next 6 months, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to see some studios that have tried and maybe didn't get the success that they'd looked for. So that'll be exciting at that point. But right now, it's a little tough, too early.
Yeah, definitely. And what we are doing now is we decided to develop something in-house to recruit some blockchain specialist and build a division around him internally. We are still in the learning process. I mean, everything is so early stage now. On the M&A side, we think that we're going to sit on the sideline for a bit, look what happens, because we know that some of the companies eventually will rise, some of them won't. So we'd rather minimize the risk and wait for the big ones or the medium ones to become stronger, and then we can step in with M&A. I think it's going to be too risky for us at this point, again, because there's so many uncertainties in terms of regulations, etc. So I think that's what we're going to do. We'll build something internally, and on M&A, we'll wait a bit and see which direction is this industry is taking.
Embracer is also taking it slowly. Usually, we enter in more mature categories. I think it's difficult to look at blockchain companies and private company valuations on blockchain companies these days relative to to the other opportunities that public companies have to acquire. So when you're looking at, opportunity A versus a blockchain company B, I think it's a much safer and much more known process to stay with what we know. And we also think that blockchain is it's also a very early stage part of the industry that is still developing. So we're on the sidelines until we understand it better and until we can see that there is a target that will help us take a catapult to the next step. And I think all of the different players in the industry right now are still before that stage.
Okay. I think probably for the benefit of this audience, I think it would be really interesting to hear individually from all of you a little bit about your M&A strategy during the pandemic, and probably how that's impacted your current strategy. As an example, do you see yourselves potentially acquiring more just development studios because you have just too many titles that you need to develop and you just need that additional resource, and just given what we talked about earlier, just tech companies exploding, and the availability and scarcity of talent, particularly on the West Coast and other tech hubs around the world, do you see yourselves potentially branching out instead of just buying principally original IP developers, which you guys are known to do? Do you see yourself buying maybe other development studios, tools, tech, other related sort of peripheral acquisition candidates?
Well, to be honest, I don't think that our strategy in terms of M&A has changed significantly before and after the pandemic. I think we have two main strategies. So I work at Plarium. I lead the M&A for Plarium, and I also work at Aristocrat Digital. So our strategy is divided into two. One is to have what we call a studio tuck-in, which will basically be a studio that will be under one of the three companies under that group, which is Plarium, Product Madness, and Big Fish. So having a company that is already established, is already big, that have great KPIs, that is like not an early stage. And the second one is acquiring another business, another arm, like a fourth arm, in addition to those companies. And I think with that sense, our strategy hasn't changed. I think that because we are a big company, we need something that can move the needle for us. So our strategy is to basically bring a company, focus on the talent, and make sure that with synergies, you can make them scale. We have established a great infrastructure. Our headquarters is providing a great infrastructure for the entire company, for the entire studios. So we have several studios, but the headquarters are supplying them with marketing, with analytics, with research. And they're doing a great job in doing that, scaling our own games. And I think that with M&A, our strategy won't be different. Basically, being a studio that you can scale, that you can have some synergies, help them with anything they need, but eventually it'll need something that is scalable and can potentially grow.
Yeah, very similar to what Ronen just said. We always look for great opportunities with studios that we can help scale, help grow, that can use the verticals that we've created to help boost what they've developed and get them where they need to go quicker. But on the Web3 side, what you're talking about, Shum, is we're also looking for talent, and we don't have enough talent at Jam City because we're focused on our own games. So we need more talent out there for our Web3 components. So we are certainly looking at different teams, different studios, different locations. So it's exciting.
I would like to add something. Although we might do some businesses with bigger studios, we still want to open the communication channel with small studios, medium-sized studios, and maintain this connection, because eventually, hopefully, it will become big and relevant. For example, our latest acquisition, Future Play, a great team based in Helsinki, Finland, we established the connection in 2017, and every year we used to meet, make the connection better, and when it became relevant, making the deal was so easy. So even though we'll make a deal with some company that is more established, it's very important to create a pipeline early stage, track their progression, see how they are going, and eventually, when the time comes, it is much easier.
for DECA Games, so DECA historically has been acquiring games only, so game assets is our business. So we acquire the game. Typically, we build a team behind those games, and then we continue the operations. So that part of the business continues today pretty much as it has in the past. Pre-pandemic, we would send a team on site to work with the team to get trained up and to take over the operations. Post-pandemic or during pandemic, it's been impossible to do that, so we have to do everything online, which has made the process a little bit longer and a little bit more difficult. And so that has affected the structure of our deals a little bit. Then the other part of DECA is acquiring some studios. We've done a few studio deals where the strategy there is to create long-term partners who are aligned with the Embracer overall strategy to grow within the industry over the next 5-10 years, and to have the entrepreneurs come in and continue to grow their businesses. And that usually starts with a relationship, which is obviously harder to build during the pandemic. But I think what's caused us to evolve our strategy more so is what we alluded to earlier, which is the guidance towards valuations. So as valuations have gone up, we tend to do less on the smaller side, less smaller deals, and really wait and be more, if we're gonna have to pay higher valuations for companies, it really needs to be transformative deals. So I think we're doing a lot less on the small side because of that. And then when things maybe equalize, maybe we'll come back to that. And then with the inability to travel, we prioritize the studios that we already have pre-existing relationships with.
And that's a really good point, Ken. I want to actually just pick up on that a little bit. We all kind of see the major headlines about all the big mega deals, et cetera, especially the beginning of this year. But I think often we don't talk about the smaller deals, which often are perhaps just not, just don't get the same press coverage. But certainly from our perspective, we thought 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, and certainly in 2021, were really years of medium-sized deals. There weren't as many large mega deals such as the beginning of this year. So we really felt actually that a lot of buyers were exercising caution to some degree, and were placing maybe not perhaps small bets, but medium-sized bets, still making meaningful acquisitions of companies out there. How do you interpret that? I mean, in regards to your strategy, do you feel that during the pandemic that you guys all exercise caution? I know, Ronen, you just said that hasn't really affected your strategy, but do you see yourselves deliberately maybe saying, you know what, because of some of the uncertainty, we're just going to scale back a little bit? Yeah, I guess that would be my...
I don't think we'll scale back a little bit, but I think it's a matter of consolidation. There are many companies out there, and again, I think that the main thing when you do a deal, it's all about the talents, it's all about the people. And if you're missing the talents, so sometimes you're gonna go with a company that is not growing as fast as you would expect, but eventually it's all about the consolidation. There aren't a lot of companies. So what we see is some kind of life cycle of the new gaming industry. I think that in 2014, 15, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it was much easier to find those medium-sized companies, super talented, but now the big ones are acquiring the medium ones. And what we see now is the talent coming out from the big ones are starting their own shop, and then you see the small one becoming medium size, and hopefully they'll become big size. So now what we see, that is the life cycle that we see. Unfortunately, there aren't many studios, so sometimes when you are in need of a specific talent or a specific genre or specific technology, then yes, you'll do it. But eventually, high level, you won't compromise on the talent or your main strategy, which hasn't changed a lot.
I agree with Ronen. You have what your filter is for the different types of targets that you look at, and you don't typically change that just because of the pandemic. But I think your ability to diligence different targets changes in the time that you have to do it. And so if you can't really get like for us, I think there is a relationship that we plan to work with the studios that we acquire for the next 10 years. So the relationship with the entrepreneur is quite important. And if you can't get a really good feel for that person, then we will exercise caution because we don't feel like we have enough information in order to make that decision. And so that's why we tend to lean more towards the studios that we already have a pre-existing relationship with. And in the time when you can't travel, you can't meet people, it's harder to build that up. So we're a little bit more cautious because of that. But also, I think again, the valuations. At every different level, you need to get value for whatever you're investing into it. And I think as valuations have gone up, we're feeling, at some point it doesn't make sense to invest in certain types of targets at certain valuations and certain sizes.
Yeah, I think for us, we certainly exercise caution. I think in the very beginning, I think like everybody, we were pretty nervous about our own existing games, take care of our own portfolio first, and then the valuations of the companies that we were looking at kind of got out of hand a little bit. So we stepped back, and 2020 didn't do that much. We certainly looked at a lot of companies, but didn't do anything. 2021, when we looked at Ludia, it was a relationship that we've had for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and probably the third time looking at them. And it was kind of a direct deal initially, and then they got a banker involved. But the numbers were kind of established, and so it wasn't shopped around, and it turned out to be a fantastic deal for us. So that was exciting. I think certainly going forward, we're excited about what's out there. But as far as the smaller deals, they're just like Ronen was saying, they're not that many of them. What's exciting is the peaks of the world, having these spawned out groups of teams that are just doing great. That's what's exciting and what's going to continue to further the gaming industry, which is something we're looking closely at.
I'm just going to ask one more question, and then I think it would be good to get some audience feedback as well. What are your predictions for this year? I mean, if you ask me in 2020 and 2021, I'd be the first one to admit that 2022 is going to be a really, really dull, poor year in terms of announced deal activity, and we're already at record levels. And I guarantee you I would have said that if you would have asked me. So I'm just wondering what you think the rest of this year has in store.
Well, I think that if someone would have asked me the early 2020, I would say the same. So I don't know. I think it'll continue. I think that, and you as a banker, you know it very well, because when there's a company that is selling and they are talented, you eventually have several potential buyers that they need to choose from. It's not that there's only one buyer and several sellers. It's the other way around. So there's a lot of buyers on the seller. So I think the trend will continue to grow. I think that we see a lot of new talents coming from different regions. I think those companies are eventually used high valuations. And I think we're going to see a lot more deals this year.
I agree that there's going to be a lot more deals, but I think the reasons for the deals will be different and the types of deals will be different. I mean, you already see it this year. You have these huge public companies buying other public companies. That didn't happen before. 2021 you had, or 2020 and 2021 you had the Swedish public companies buying small mid-sized companies because there was a very big valuation arbitrage, and the valuations have come down quite a bit in the last year. So I think that strategy is going to be less appealing for all those companies. So I think the types of, I think that we're likely to see these bigger, larger transactions between public companies, the different shifts that are happening within the broader industry, not just on M&A, but just in general, around platforms being built, Web3 being built, people looking for content that drives the reasons for people to do acquisitions. So I see that being the driving factor behind why some of these companies in the industry are going to do more M&A. So either to acquire content and IP, or talent to build new content in IP for specific reasons, either on their streaming platform or their Web3 platform or whatever it is.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. From my perspective, I'm really excited about, Web3 Plater and see where it's going to go. Hopefully there's going to be some games that come out that are truly games, and people understand, people can get it, and that will be exciting, I hope. And our game, hopefully, will be one of those. Nice plug, right? Champions Ascension. So anyway, that's Web3. I think it needs a lot of sifting to get to the good stuff at the end, and hopefully the end of 22 we'll see some of that.
Yeah, maybe, I guess if the audience has any questions.
Hi guys, thanks very much for the presentation. Could you comment on, firstly, on kind of different kinds of acquirers in the sense of perhaps businesses we would have seen as ad tech platforms getting involved in games, and also the kind of missing in action big tech companies, because Microsoft and Sony are the console guys of old, even if they now have new subscriptions. But we hear or have heard Google and Amazon and Facebook saying they're very interested, and making your own game seems to take a while. So where are these guys? Thanks.
I'll take the first stab at your question. I think if you're a pure play tech player, whether you're Google, Amazon, I mean, and Amazon actually has a pretty thriving games business, as you know, and obviously they've had different initiatives like Lumberyard, which didn't do too well. But I think that any streaming provider, and if we look at Netflix as well, right, that's now emerging into the industry. I think they're going to look at it from a slightly different perspective. So they're going to look at it from where their strengths really lie. So I think if there's an underlying tech advantage that they can bring to a particular game studio, they're going to probably rely heavily on that. And so right now it's really a battle for content, right? So it's really the platform wars that we're witnessing right now between Microsoft, Sony, and possibly even Epic at some stage, who knows, or engine wars for that matter. I think until there's technology that really attracts, the likes of Google or somebody else, Amazon, then I think they'll probably make a foray in. That's just my perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that content is king today. All of the platforms are looking for more content to provide to their players. And I think that we'll see a lot of more deals of platform and content creators. I don't think that the last one that we've seen is the last one. I think that we'll see so many of them, of those platforms looking for more content to provide to their players.
If the question was mainly about Google, Amazon, and the biggest tech players, I think you saw with Microsoft that it took a really meaty acquisition target for them to come out and do something big, and I think that will be the same for the other big tech companies. They really need to do, if they're going to do something in gaming, it needs to be big, or they'll just do it internally. So there's not so many different targets of that size. So I think I would be surprised if Google and Amazon does a big deal. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's more consolidation happening amongst the pure play gaming companies.
Revenue and EBITDA multiple each of the, and look at the M&A targets.
Well, I think it varies. I think that it depends on so many factors. It depends on the growth, on the size of the company, the potential, what we can do, all the synergies. There are so many questions. I don't think there's one valuation that fits them all. It's really about the trend and what you can do. It's really about the trend and what you can do. So I think that we do see valuations, but again, most of the companies today are relying on either obviously traditional. Before the pandemic, we saw 2 to 3 on multiple on revenue and something around 8 to 12 on EBITDA. Today we saw deals that are 4 on revenue and up to 20 on EBITDA. But again, it depends. There are so many factors that you need to take into consideration. I think that the growth and the synergies are the main ones, and companies that are more stable, you see on the lower scale of that range.
Yeah, when we look, it really depends on the studio and where they're at in their life cycle and whatnot. So we'd pay, you know, a higher multiple and probably an exciting bet, if you will. But some of the, you know, the 15, 20x EBITDA multiples, we're not going to touch, just based on where we are as a company. Some companies might, but where we're at, we got to look at EBITDA means a lot to us, so we wouldn't get there.
Yeah, I think you'll see in this year more people looking not just at multiples. I mean, I agree with everything that everybody said here, and generally same with the ranges. But I think in more, you'll see this year that people are looking at payback periods as well. So not just like what is the standard multiple for how much I'm paying for this target, but also the acquirer has to see, okay, when am I going to make my money back, and when is it going to give me on? When am I going to make money on top of that? And when you're talking about these bigger public companies buying other public companies, obviously that's a different ballgame. But I think when you're looking at most of the other active acquirers, there was a bit of a frenzy in the last few years. But I think in this year, my prediction is that they're going to be a lot more disciplined, I guess.
Being involved in quite a lot of deals we're executing right now, I can confirm everything these guys have just said. So yeah, I think you're definitely starting to see valuation expectations come down. There's no doubt about it. Just given where a lot of the public companies are trading, they can't really justify paying these significant premiums to even their own trading multiples. Again, what Ronen alluded to, I mean, if a company is growing at 200x a year and can demonstrate that they can continue to grow at that pace, and there's clear synergies you've identified, whether it's from a UA perspective, a live ops perspective, a cross-platform perspective, and it's very real. Those synergies are very real and can be achieved within a short period of time. Then yes, there's always exceptions to those rules.